So conservatives lately have been calling for regulation of social media. Can you guys believe it? The conservatives in America, I am from now on calling them pretenders of capitalism, because they're not defenders of capitalism. They are pretenders of capitalism. They love capitalism when it comes to owning the left. But when capitalism, when free markets, when it becomes a little too inconvenient for conservatives in the right wing, so to speak, they are happy to just throw property rights and capitalism and free markets right into the garbage. And you notice how conservatives today, they're much more eager to demand regulation, more regulation on businesses like Facebook and Twitter and social media. They're much more passionate about imposing more regulations than they are scaling back regulations. Have conservatives called for any significant reductions in regulations on, say, finance or education or healthcare over the last few years? Not really. Am I at the boss already? I guess we'll find out. If I get my butt kicked, I already saved it, so it doesn't matter. Oh, the Shy Guys are running. So, what happened was, Facebook, they decided to ban Alex Jones, Louis Farrakhan, and Paul Joseph Stalin, and Milo Yiannopoulos, and others. Paul Nellon was another one, Laura Loomer. Now, I'm all for criticizing Facebook. We can have a discussion on whether or not this was a good decision. I have no problem criticizing Facebook as a company. Where I draw the line is these demands for government regulation. So one talking point I've noticed from the conservatives, I've seen this on the left too. A lot of people on the left, I noticed Kyle Kulinski and what's his face? Tim Pool. They've said that Facebook is now the public square. You hear that? Facebook, Twitter, they're the public square. What the fuck does that even mean? They're the public square. I don't know if you guys know this. This might be controversial. This might be news to someone. But the fact of the matter is that Facebook, companies like Facebook and Twitter, they're not public squares. They are businesses. They are businesses that exist to make money. Oh no, you guys, a business. They're motivated by making money. How greedy and how selfish. Can't have that going on. Because the profit motive is so evil, you guys. If you don't believe me, if you don't believe me, the fact that these companies exist to make money, just go to the stock market. Look up Twitter, look up Facebook. Notice that you are free to buy shares in a company like Facebook and Twitter. And usually people buy stock in companies. They buy shares in a company. Again, this might be news to people, but people usually invest in the stock market because they're looking for some sort of financial reward, some sort of monetary gain. I know this might be news to people. I know a lot of people on the so-called left, even conservatives, they've never really bothered to look into this stuff in their entire lives. Never bothered to shop for stocks, make investments. But I can assure you, no one has ever bought a share in Twitter or Facebook thinking to themselves, huh, I don't really care whether or not I get a financial reward. I don't really care if I make money off of this investment. I'm just buying stock in this company because I want to help foster political discourse for the sake of our democracy. Yeah, no one has ever said that, ever, in the history of buying stock in a company. People buy stocks in a company for monetary benefit. And that's why Facebook and Twitter exist, is because they want to make money. They need to make money for shareholders. So they're not public squares. And as a result, and because of this, Facebook and Twitter, social media companies, they have every right to make their own rules, set their own guidelines that will help them make money, both in the short term and the long term. Because one of two things is true here. Either these bannings, these recent bans from Facebook, either they're going to be good for business, they're going to help Facebook sustain their current cash flow, or heck, they even might help Facebook make more money. Maybe this will be really good for business. Maybe this will make Facebook more profitable. And if that's the case, then the decision to ban Alex Jones and the rest is totally justified. Because these companies exist to make money. Or, this is true. The decision that these bans, these decisions to ban, they're not good for business, and they're going to end up costing Facebook lots of money. They're going to cost Facebook customers, which is possible. I don't know if this is a good decision or not. But if it's a bad decision, if it costs Facebook money, then maybe they'll reverse decision. Maybe they'll reverse the bans and say, look, we messed up. And we're going to let these conspiracy theorists and these racists like Louis Farrakhan and Paul Nellen, just going to let them back onto Facebook because banning them was bad for business. And either way, government regulation is not required. Because the profit motive will inspire Facebook to make the correct decisions. Again, Facebook exists to make money. They don't exist to foster democracy, foster political discourse for the sake of democracy. It's fucking stupid. Notice, it's usually people who have no skin in the game, who don't buy, don't invest in companies. It's usually those people that call for government regulation. Because it's not their property that's at stake. Another talking point I notice conservatives are making, they're making this big fuss about whether or not these social media companies are big, scary monopolies. Yeah, that's right. They're taking plays from the Marxist playbook. These social media companies, they're big, scary monopolies, you guys. So we need antitrust legislation. No one ever talks about whether or not antitrust legislation is good, or moral, or right. Oh, crap. I totally forgot to, God, I'm such an idiot. Because, and this makes sense. This is what you get when you make the altruistic, arguments for capitalism, which is what conservatives do. They make the altruistic, utilitarian arguments for capitalism. They like capitalism because it yields the highest... Oh my god. It yields the highest standard of living. And results in highest standard of living for all people. By mere fact of innovation and competitive markets where businesses compete with each other by trying to reduce prices, either through competing on the market through price cuts, or by trying to make their businesses more efficient by mass producing more goods, which also drives down prices, which makes things competitive. But conservatives, they think capitalism is good because of the competition. So if they see a monopoly, if they see a company that gets control, a significant control, or 100% control over an industry, then they see that as being anti-competitive, right? Because to the conservative mind, oh no, this big monopoly that they have 100% control of an industry without any competition, they'll just, they won't have any reason to be competitive. They won't have any reason to innovate. The monopoly won't have any reason to... They'll just jack up prices. They'll just squeeze their customers because, again, there's no reason to innovate. There's no reason to not jack up prices. These monopolies, they'll just do whatever it takes. They'll just jack up prices. So, from the conservative point of view, we can't have monopolies because... it's anti-competition, because they think it's competition is what makes capitalism great. Not freedom, not property rights. It's competition, because competition is what yields the highest standard of living. And I've made a whole video about, it's called The Myth of the Monopoly, where I talk in depth about why why monopoly is a weasel word, and how in the history of free markets, there's never been a monopoly that does what the monopoly alarmists allege, which is jack up prices and refuse to innovate and all that stuff. Have a whole video about it, won't go off into that tangent, but just look at the state of social media, because the conservatives, I've seen Candace Owens make this point, I've seen many conservatives make this point, that these tech companies, these social media companies like Facebook and Twitter, they're big scary monopolies. Are they? We have two right off the bat, Twitter and Facebook, those are the big ones, right? So how can there be a monopoly when there's more than one competitor in the market? This really isn't hard, you guys. Not to mention, I mean, there's been various competitors in the marketplace. Over the years, we've had, I mean, MySpace used to be the big dog. Go look it up. There were articles about whether or not MySpace is a big, scary monopoly. Facebook was once the big underdog for years. From 2004 to 2010, MySpace was the big dog. They were the big, scary monopoly in social media. And Facebook competed with them. We've also had Twitter, we've had Tumblr, we've had Reddit, we've had LiveJournal. Google tried to get in on social media with Google+. Google, despite all of their money, the billions of dollars they have in cash flow, and the infrastructure and all of the tech geniuses they have, they were not able to put a dent in Facebook, and they tried to compete with them. So yeah, there's no monopolies in social media. And now conservatives are trying to say that they're a monopoly so that they can justify using antitrust to regulate them. Again, these are the defenders of capitalism. It's disgusting. Of course, this isn't surprising. As I've said before, go watch the movie. There's an ESPN 30 for 30 called Small Potatoes, which is about the USFL, this football league, this secondary football league to the NFL. And one of the owners in the USFL was Donald Trump, the current president of the United States. And Donald Trump tried to use antitrust legislation, alleging that the NFL was a monopoly and that these broadcast companies were monopolies, and tried to use antitrust legislation to force broadcast companies like ABC and NBC to air USFL games in the name of competition. This is how great of a businessman Donald Trump is. He has to use cronyism and regulations to compete. Actually, going back to the public square argument, someone asked if I've seen The Social Network. Yes, I have. And it's all about how Facebook started. I mean, these companies that don't exist in a vacuum. Someone had to put thought and effort. Someone had to raise money to get angel investors, and they had to pay engineers, software engineers, to program all the algorithms and figure out what's good and bad and how the business should work. And people suddenly think they have a right to it? It's absolutely outrageous. Conservatives are also trying to make this platform versus publisher argument. Oh, Facebook, they have to decide whether, Facebook and Twitter, they have to decide whether or not they're a publisher or a platform. What a false dichotomy. So this all comes from what I think it's Article 230 in one of these regulations regarding social media that has determined that these social media companies are not publishers. Now, this wasn't done as a means to protect people from so-called discrimination, to protect people from getting banned from social media. This was meant to protect social media companies from unfair and frivolous lawsuits because these social media companies, they're essentially tools that give people the ability to post their ideas. So yeah, so if social media companies were declared as publishers, then they could be sued for any nasty thing, any slander or libelous thing that that's published on or that's posted on their platforms. That would be the end of social media, by the way. If you determine that social media companies like Facebook and Twitter, if they were publishers, then they would just shut down, because if anyone can say whatever they want on these platforms, then everyone would just sue them into oblivion, and they wouldn't be profitable anymore. So Article 30, it's regulations like that. They're meant to protect social media companies, not to give people a right to use social media companies. It's a total evasion and dishonest way of looking at the issue. What about that gives people a right to use other people's platforms? I mean, platforms can still be considered private property, can they not? Is there any difference? So if I were to post something slanderous or libelous on Facebook, Facebook can't get sued because that's me saying that on their platform. So that's not Facebook saying it, that's me using Facebook to say that. It's like if I were to buy poster board and markers from my local drugstore, and if I were to write something slanderous or libelous, and if I were to post it on a sign somewhere, well, you wouldn't sue the poster board and marker companies because they didn't write it. I used their product to write it. Same with Facebook. There's a huge difference between CNN publishing a story because that's a point of view. They're in the business of publishing, and likewise, they have to screen and edit out anything that might be slanderous or libelous. They have to be careful because they're selling journalism, whereas Facebook is selling a platform. Back to the monopoly thing, though. It's interesting because usually one of the big hysterics about monopolies is that if monopolies, if they're not regulated, they'll just jack up prices. Well, if Facebook and Twitter, if they're monopolies, notice how they have not really jacked up prices. It's still, you still don't have to pay fees to use Twitter or Facebook. And people say they invade your privacy. No, they don't. That's what you're paying Facebook and Twitter for. A lot of people like to evade this. But you don't traditionally pay Facebook and Twitter in the form of dollars. You pay them in the form of information. They're letting you use their platform free of charge in exchange for information. So if you like Avril Lavigne on Twitter, or if you like Hostess Cupcakes on Twitter, or if you like South Park on Twitter, then they're going to use that information to sell to companies who want to reach you as an audience. Say one of your interests on Facebook is riding motorcycles. Okay, well then Harley Davidson is going to say, "Hey Facebook, give us customers who are interested in riding motorcycles so that we can target that demographic." But yeah, the publisher-platform dichotomy, it's such a false dichotomy if I've ever heard one. Why can't we just maybe declare social media is it's kind of its own thing, you know? Maybe we need a new definition. It's a platform, but I mean, don't companies, private companies, if they're selling a platform, don't they still have the right to exercise their judgment? That's another thing is conservatives. So back to the publisher platform thing. The way conservatives are painting this is they're saying the bans are politically motivated, which there might be truth to that, although they banned Louis Farrakhan. But what are they saying? That a race realist like Paul Nellen, he's on the conservative side. Conspiracy theorists like Alex Jones and Paul Joseph Watson, they're on the conservative side. Really? That's the team you want to be on? And if you look at Facebook's if you look at Facebook's terms of service, especially regarding things like integrity, which deals with fake news, and hate speech, I think all of the bans were pretty legitimate and in line with their terms of service. Maybe Paul Joseph Watson, I'm willing to maybe concede that he got unfairly screwed, but I also think, you know, Paul Joseph Watson, he's been working for InfoWars for a variety of years. InfoWars, which has a long history of peddling conspiracy theories and fake news and hysteria. I think once you go down that road, once you jump in bed with a garbage organization like InfoWars, I mean, and they get banned for publishing fake news, and you notably work for them and promote them, I think at a point it's just like, look, it sucks that you got screwed by guilt of association, but maybe you shouldn't have went all in on InfoWars. And I'd have the same line of thinking when it comes to Marxist news organizations like, say, Current Affairs, or this new Means TV that I recently did a video on. I think, yeah, if you associate with them, then it's like, okay, if you're gonna appear on their news networks, I'm putting you in the communist box. I think I made a whole video about the Young Turks and how they're useful idiots for communism. It's like, yeah, once you start playing grab ass with communists, then I start to associate you with communists. If you're Paul Joseph Watson, once you associate with conspiracy theorists, well then you're kind of fake news, aren't you? But apparently everyone should have a constitutional right to post fake news on other people's property. It's what conservatives want. So yeah, social media companies, a business is not a public square. You can't just declare a business. Once a business becomes ubiquitous, once it becomes popular enough, you don't get to just declare it a public square or public good. I know there's a lot of history in America of services like electric companies and utilities. AT&T was declared a public good. It was made into a monopoly thanks to government regulation. Doesn't mean it was good. Just an appeal to authority. Yeah, in the 30s, I think the government, they made some regulation that essentially made AT&T into a big monopoly. And they claim to be all against monopolies, but then they want to create monopolies. I think it was some libertarian economist made the point on Twitter that, like, yeah, if you bring the government into social media, if you regulate them, you're more likely to guarantee that Facebook will be a monopoly because you've declared their business, their product, a public good, so to speak. So why do you need competition if it's suddenly a public good? But it's not. It's a business. Again, no one buys stock in Facebook and Twitter thinking, oh, you know, I'm gonna do this. I don't really care about the money. I'm doing this because I wanna foster political discourse for the sake of our democracy. No, if you buy stock in a company, you're doing so because you want to make money. And there's nothing wrong with that. Oh yeah, BitChute's another competitor. Gab is another competitor. Gab's been trying to compete. It's not that easy to compete, folks. I don't see conservatives trying to use free market forces by calling for a mass boycott and exodus of Facebook. Isn't it amazing? Conservatives, they're calling for altruism. They're calling for Facebook and Twitter to have their property rights sacrificed for the sake of some greater good, for the sake of the public interest. Yet, why aren't they making sacrifices? Why aren't they giving up Facebook for the sake of the public good? Because, again, I think if this proves to be a bad decision, then it will hurt Facebook on the financial end, and they might reverse decision, or they might go out of business. Disney's becoming a big scary monopoly too, which encouraged me to buy stock. Bombs away. Who's this guy? ISIS? Yeah, that's one of my strategies though. Whenever a politician like Bernie Sanders Whenever they complain about a certain company making too much money, being so greedy, I think, oh, wow, is that the case? Is Disney making a lot of money? Well, if that's the case, I'm going to buy stock in that company because I want to make some money. Monopolies are only possible through government regulation, either through government locking out competition with regulation, which you often see with utilities, as I mentioned with AT&T, or they discourage competition through subsidies or tax breaks or favors. So monopolies are only possible with the help of government. Or you've seen this over-enforcement of patents. You've seen this with the FDA. A lot of times, government intellectual property protectors, they can over-enforce patents or lock competitors out of the markets with bad patent policy. So, but again, that's something that government has to fix. Not government needs correct patent policies. It's not a That's not saying we should get rid of intellectual property. I know a lot of libertarians advocate for that. No, you're right, Spin Dragon. Spin Dragon says, even if a monopoly formed naturally, then what's wrong with the concept? I mentioned this in my video about monopolies. It's called The Myth of the Monopoly if you haven't seen it. But, yeah, I think this point was made with Alcoa Aluminum. They had 100% control of an aluminum market, but they never jacked up prices because they knew if they jacked up prices that a competitor would swoop right in and start competing with them. Usually companies become big and powerful by being good. I think that's the real reason why people hate big companies, is because they are good, because they are efficient, because people voluntarily trade with them. But even in the case with, what was it? Rockefeller and Standard Oil, that's usually one of the go-to examples. Standard Oil at the peak of their powers controlled 92% of the oil market in America. They never had full control of the industry. They often had a lot of competition from the Russians and overseas. That's where a lot of their competition came from. And by the time they were getting tried with antitrust legislation, other companies like Texaco and Gulf Oil had already taken a significant amount of Standard Oil's market share. Uh-oh. This Shy Guy looks like Pinochet, doesn't he? Another boss defeated. I think this is the part where I gotta bake a cake. That's another thing. I think Princess Peach is about to bake a cake here. And you notice how conservatives were, they were all about property rights when it came to a Christian bakery's right to not bake cakes for gay weddings. And, but when it comes to social media companies, now they're like, oh, well, now everyone has a right to your product or service. Why don't we just declare Christian bakeries as a public service, as the public square? Can we do that? Such warriors of property rights, those conservatives. Hey, Christian bakeries, they can discriminate against gays, but Facebook can't ban conspiracy theorists. No, 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 no. Can't ban anti-Semites like Louis Farrakhan and Paul Nellen. You guys are crossing the line, Facebook. Anti-Semites should have a constitutional right to use other people's property to spread their anti-Semitism. See, I'm about to bake a cake for this guy over here. Is this like a transgendered Klansman or something?